Welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're looking at a pretty fascinating transformation. Basically, we're taking off our hats as passive readers of STEM and STEAM theories, and we're stepping directly into the role of instructional architects. We'll be breaking down an assignment that's focused entirely on applied analysis, specifically designing engagement and authenticity in STEM instruction. So let's just get right to work.
Okay, let's dive into the core question driving all of this. How do we actually move from just understanding concepts to designing truly engaging learning? It's one thing to read about good teaching, right? But it's an entirely different ballgame to actually build it yourself. And that's really what this entire assignment is about, shifting your mindset from being a passive consumer of information to becoming an active, intentional designer of learning experiences.
So, here's our blueprint for today. First, your STEM instruction mission. Then, mapping the lesson overview, followed by analyzing student engagement. After that, evaluating authentic learning, redesigning for improvement, and finally, the requirements and core purpose.
Starting off with Section 1, your STEM instruction mission, moving from concepts to experiences.
I want to be clear right out of the gate. This is definitely not your traditional reading response. It's a hands-on, applied analysis. Your ultimate mission here is to move from just grasping concepts to actively evaluating and designing engaging learning experiences. You're going to take David J. Chernov's frameworks from his work on integrative STEM and STEAM education, and you're going to apply them to a real lesson. And why does this matter? Well, because you're directly laying the groundwork for your major CA1 unit. You're building toward a really significant goal here.
Moving on to Section 2, mapping the lesson overview, laying the foundation.
All right, so this is part 1 of the assignment. First things first, you need to select a single lesson to analyze. Now, this could be one you created yourself back in EDST 601, or just one you found online. Once you've got it, you need to establish a brief overview by answering 3 very specific foundational questions. What's the lesson actually about? Who are the specific learners in this context, like what grade level? And what exactly are the students expected to do? Keep this part brief, though. You're really just setting the stage before the heavy analysis begins.
That brings us to Section 3, analyzing student engagement, inspecting the structure.
Okay, now for the really fun part. Part 2. This is where you put on your inspector's hat and essentially interrogate your chosen lesson using the assignment rubric. You want to ask, how does this lesson support, or perhaps more importantly, fail to support student engagement? Are the students actually actively involved? And if so, exactly how? And finally, does the lesson provide the right level of challenge and interest? You're basically diagnosing this lesson based directly on Chernov's theories to see if it actually holds up under scrutiny.
And what's super interesting to look for here is that stark contrast between active involvement and passive reception. Ask yourself, are the students actually doing the science and math, or are they just kind of sitting back passively while the teacher does all the heavy lifting? Look for that active involvement. And honestly, if it's missing, you need to call it out.
Next up is Section 4, evaluating authentic learning, making those real-world connections.
As we enter Part 3, your focus shifts entirely to authenticity. You have to ask, does this lesson have genuine relevance outside the 4 walls of the classroom? Is it connected to a real-world problem? Are students applying their knowledge in meaningful ways? Think of it like this. If they're just filling out a worksheet on gravity, that's purely academic. But if they're, say, designing a parachute to safely land a fragile object, now that is pushing toward truly authentic learning.
So, you're essentially weighing these 2 extremes against each other. You have to carefully evaluate exactly where your chosen lesson falls on this spectrum. Is it an authentic, meaningful task, or mostly a traditional academic one? And remember, you've got to use the readings to clearly justify your verdict.
Section 5, redesigning for improvement. This is the rebuild phase.
Welcome to Part 4. This is where we totally pivot the energy. We're moving out of that critical teardown phase and stepping right into a highly creative rebuild phase. Your main objective here is to revise to align. This is literally your moment to take those STEM and STEAM principles and use them to completely fix, upgrade, and elevate the lesson you just finished critiquing.
To execute this rebuild successfully, you'll need to detail your answers to a few highly actionable questions. How would you, specifically, increase engagement? How would you make the learning much more authentic? What would the students actually be doing differently in your version of the lesson? This is the point where you truly get to step into that role of an instructional architect. We want to see your vision come to life. Finally, Section 6, Requirements and Core Purpose, going over the final specs.
Before we wrap up, let's quickly run through the final specs, the actual logistical requirements for the assignment. I'm just going to rapid fire through these for you. Your analysis needs to be pretty tight, somewhere between 500 and 800 words. Make sure to use clear section headings, keep the tone professional, and yes, APA format is required. However, there's no need for a cover page or an abstract, just jump right into the good stuff.
Now, the reason we stress all these logistics is because they really do serve a much greater purpose. You're taking these high-level concepts of engagement and authenticity and applying them in a very tangible way. You're actively strengthening your ability to look at absolutely any lesson and immediately know exactly how to improve it. And honestly, most importantly, all of this hard work directly supports the development of your major CA1 unit. You're quite literally laying the groundwork right now for your future success as an educator.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a final thought to kind of guide your writing. When you finally get to that rebuild phase, will your redesigned lesson simply teach a concept, or will it actually solve a real-world problem? I want you to really think about that difference, because ultimately, that is the exact gap between traditional schooling and true integrative STEM education. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Now, go build something incredible.